Welcome to the Keeping IT Real podcast. This podcast features honest and transparent conversations about what it takes to manage corporate technology and expenses today. Each episode, listen to true and personal stories from IT professionals who are working hard to make sure their business stays connected and competitive. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo, and let's meet our next guest. I am joined by Taruna Rai, a VP of IT. Taruna brings a wealth of experience in IT strategy, transformation, and operational excellence, driving innovation and efficiency across diverse technology landscapes. Taruna, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I kind of did that classic, I stalked you on LinkedIn, and here's how I think I'm going to describe you with a lot of jargon and words. But why don't you kind of describe yourself, introduce yourself to the audience? What does it mean to be you, and who are you?
Yeah, sure. I like the stalking. You did a great job. It's interesting because when I meet folks and introduce myself to teams, I joke out I'm a head of IT for some pretty significant teams that do great things, and I've never been a developer. And I've had to play that role. I've always played a space in the space of like connecting IT to the rest of the business. And so I've really enjoyed and thrived on driving transformation, driving change, and making sure that IT is always connected to delivering business outcomes. So that's what brings me the most joy in my career. And when I reflect on my career and all the things I've done, what I attribute a lot of my wins to as well. But yeah, so that's me in my version of what I do.
When, a lot of IT comes from development, or you hear a lot of stories and they're like, oh, I loved coding. I loved computers is the first thing that I came upon. Obviously, you had just said that you had never started as a developer. So where did I don't want to say the word love necessarily until you use that word, but where did the sort of introduction into this industry really come for you?
Yeah. I tried. I really did try coding. I gave it my best shot, I promise. And then when I was in school, I thought I was going to be a CS major. And what I missed really quickly was understanding the point of what I was doing, like from a business outcome, how was I moving the needle perspective? And so I was venting about it and my frustration, actually to my sister. And she was like, have you ever heard of information systems at IT? But it's also like in the business school. So it's like how systems can help companies. And her very basic explanation of it at the time resonated with me. I know it's evolved into so many different things since then, but that's how I pivoted. So I did try as a developer, and I have a lot of appreciation for the hard work that developers put into it. I just wanted to and my impatient side of me wanted to get to see the business outcome faster. And so that is why I stayed in IT, but found a better home studying information systems instead of computer science.
Was there ever a moment where you're like, maybe it's not IT, maybe it's not tech, maybe it's being a doctor, or if you're staying in the world of business, maybe it's finance or marketing or sales?
I know. I did. I'm not gonna lie. When I was in high school, I did think I was gonna be a doctor.
Mm,
Um,
me too.
and I had to do my first like CAD dissection, and that dream shattered real fast. So luckily, it was my junior or senior year that I started taking my first programming classes, and I think that it really resonated, and I found that alternative. But as I have been through my career, and um, and have progressed and gotten to engage with different teams, different functions. I mean, am I always looking at them from that aspect of learning and what does this function do and how do we um, support the business processes and the outcomes they're trying to deliver? So it is something that's always on my mind, maybe when it's time to do like the midlife career change or something. That I'm like, maybe one day I'll come and I'll see where else I want to go in my career. But I also think the way IT has evolved, systems is going to be there, whatever function you go into. So I think staying connected will always be part of what I do.
So when your sister explained information systems, what was that explanation? What is information systems basically then? And then how has it evolved and what is information systems now to you?
Yeah. I don't know if it's evolved or my appreciation has definitely evolved. Let me put it that way as a 19-year-old versus, where I am today, how old I am today.
Yeah, good.
No, I think though back then it was like, oh, the very, very basic explanation of it was, all right, how do we use systems and data to drive process efficiencies, right? And that um, is what made me interested in it. I was like, oh, I can improve something. I can make a task easier for another person. Or, when we're in like this concept of introducing like decision models and how to automate that and the yes and no loops and all those things was how I started out in it. And then to see how, once I started working and getting into projects and being exposed to different business processes, how the idea of that systems thinking, of standardization, thinking about scalability, about checks and balances and things like that. That's I think what the appreciation of it has evolved throughout my career. Yes, it's very easy to say we can automate a process, leveraging systems and technology, but the controls, the error handling, the uh, thinking all the use cases and the scenarios and involving systems to deliver that and experience, and then overlaying it with like user experience, has been a lot of the fun learning that I've had the opportunity to have throughout my career.
Yeah, so kind of talk about that a little because if you're a developer, you have one really specific set of expertise and knowledge, which is like you give me a problem and I will know how to, you'll give me a technological problem and I will know how to code that to come up with the answer. If you're strictly in business, you're like, like I need this to happen, this happen, this to happen. Whichever relevant team can do that, can you do that? But you're in this weird middle where you have this thing that moves really, really, really fast, technology, and then business, which also moves really, really fast but doesn't necessarily understand technology, and then developers don't necessarily understand business, right? And
Right.
I'm simplifying there, but that is kind of the day and age, which is like technology people, developers are like, I just want to code, and then the business people are like, we want to make money, and you're like, how do we turn the coding into money?
Yeah.
But then also, how do we kind of conceptualize that? So, what is that like to kind of have your feet in both, not really be like the person in both, but be that translator, if you will? What is that job? What is your job, your role like?
I know. I think that's what I've been like all my days doing, right? Is figuring that out and how to balance it. So I think to your point, developers in the most stereotypical way, right? Are like, just tell me what to code. And then they also want to code it perfectly, like with the best technological standards and the most robust solution, et cetera. And so and that inevitably takes time. And when you want to think about all the layers of quality and beautiful technology design that we'd like to have in our perfect worlds, balancing with that with the speed of needing business results and business outcomes. And I literally am spending most of my day coaching and almost negotiating for both sides on this, right? On, okay, I understand we're going to incur some tech debt with the developers. I understand it's not the ideal way to do it, but there's a business reason why. And there is sometimes a legit reason to go off best practices. And the same thing with understanding business outcomes, right? People, when they want to roll out a new program, it's like sometimes the stakeholders that I work with are basically like, I'm going to tell you everything I want. Now, can you just figure out how to do this in an iterative manner? Like, and so I apply some of that as well. Like, okay, I've heard everything. Now, what are the phases? How do we knock out these business problems in an iterative way that we can manage? Um, IT timeline and delivering value as well as moving the needle and producing some business results. It's like it's this negotiation that I do every day with every stakeholder. And then like playing this game of Tetris of like how do all the projects fit together
Yes,
with my resources. I'm like, oh, I need that, a screen to just be moving these, these things around.
right. Yeah. How do you just not become the universal enemy? Like
I
I think
know.
being a negotiator is like, you either make everyone love you or you make everyone like not like you, because you're
playing this
I know.
delicate balance of making everyone happy? How, I guess that is the question. That's the game, right? How do you balance all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I make everyone happy. That's for sure. But I think it's also that's the part where, in addition to staying super connected to my technology teams in understanding what they're doing and understanding their problems or their concerns, right? The negotiation comes in being able, my ability to be able to translate that concern to both parties, regardless of who it is, to get to the right answer. And I think a lot of that um, has been, you know, building that relationship with stakeholders and that credibility of they trust that if I'm raising a red flag, I'm not going to do it in vain, right? For everything, that when there's truly a concern that's been brought up to my level that is worth me pausing and asking a question for and asking for a pivot on, the credibility of the appreciation that they trust me, they trust I understand their problem, and that they trust that they understand my responsibility for advocating for good, clean, quality systems. Um, that takes relationship building. That takes um, earning some street cred. When you join an organization and a full appreciation and a lot of um, staying connected to the business to really be able to know when to push and when to pull on these in these conversations.
Would you say that your people skills were innate or
Yeah.
learned? And how did you learn the skills that you now have to be this translator, this negotiator, this middleman, but not only the middleman?
Yeah. It's fun. I joke with folks. One of my first careers out of school was being an IT auditor. Um, so it was the first year of Sarbanes-Oxley, and I think I ramped up so fast as an IT auditor having to deliver news where like, hey, you need to do a process change or you need to change a control so you can pass the audit. That for sure helped on my negotiation. Absolutely. You like have to, I mean, you had to get some thick skin to go in front of someone who knew their systems, were very protective of their systems and the quality of what they did, and to come in as an outside person from public accounting and, you know, a little enthusiastic 24-year-old, like, I know something, to build that rapport is how I quickly learned that those skills and ramped up on it to have that appreciation to do the negotiation. So while some may say it was not the most glamorous sounding title of being an IT auditor, I learned a lot of great skills from working with people in that role, 100%.
I mean, now you're a VP of IT, so who really cares about what the non-glamour, what the non-glamorous titles were?
For people who love IT audit, there is the right type of person for that. I don't want to offend
Yeah,
anyone.
no. Also, some people might have the title IT auditor and be like, "This is the dream job I've had since I was like 9." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
No, there's a right person. Um, yeah, for
that's
sure.
awesome. You mentioned street cred and you mentioned building kind of that rapport and that trust so that the all stakeholders come to you and understand that they know that you will deliver what you want to deliver on both sides, on all sides. What were some of the things that I guess maybe it's a two-part question. What were some of the things in your career that like helped you build that street cred and made you realize, oh, imposter syndrome, gone. I know I'm good at this. But then also like when you join a new company or a new team, like what do you do to develop that street cred? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, I brought all of this experience in from my previous company, but they don't know that. So they need to know you as you. So two-parter, kind of answer it how you want, but what were the things that made you believe that you belonged in this role and this industry? And then what makes your new team members, old team members believe that you are the right fit for that role?
Yeah. I think one of the other career experiences I had that helped me overcome the imposter syndrome part was I spent a number of years in M&A, but on the IT side of it. And
Oh,
so
fine.
I know it actually, I will say it is definitely one of the more fun roles that I've had for sure. If I wasn't doing what I was doing today, I would definitely go back and do that.
You're crazy in a good way. You're crazy.
But if you think about it, right, to come into a deal and understand how to architect or either break apart or integrate systems to deliver the right business value for why we were doing a transaction, for each of the functions, like to be able to do that and get to good enough, not perfect, but a good enough state that we were confident enough to sign a contract was an experience that helped me overcome the imposter syndrome effect of it, of, leading with curiosity, taking the time to ask questions, processing, doing those cycles to really make sure we're understanding and confirming in in a quick manner, right? We had to do these things quickly and, undercover sometimes as well. So you could only ask like one or two people some random question, and to be able to pull that together to at least have a proposal, was where I really built that skill set, that gave me the confidence boost. I'm like, oh, I don't know the systems and I don't know all these functions, but I know how to come at a place of asking questions and how to when to dive deeper, or when is good enough, to move forward and make a decision. So that's how I built the muscle. Coming into a new organization, I think, um, you know, ramping up and taking the time to get to know everyone and the processes and understanding some of the history. So at my current organization, when I joined a few years ago, to understand the journey that everyone had taken to get to where we were, was really important. And then understanding, and having that appreciation, because it would have been really easy for me to come into this role and tell her like, this is all wrong, this is not how IT organizations operate, or something very dramatic like that. But to have that appreciation and then figure out the right way to drive change and incorporate at the right pace. So I think for that to build that trust, it makes small changes where people felt confident that they could keep like biting away more and more, and then faster and faster as well, right? So I had to really, um, not slow down, but adjust to the organization and their aptitude for change. My previous role, which was interesting, my previous organization, culturally, the organization liked to move a lot faster. So, coming in and I was like, I can just do this. And people were like, yeah, let's go. This is fun. I was like, all right, let's go. So I think having that patience to really take the time of not coming in and assuming that everything is wrong, or that nobody else knows what they're doing or whatnot. I think it does take some of those conversations um, and piecing in and layering in the right changes at the right pace, for sure.
I think when I talk to people like you, especially in the role that you're in, it tends to get a little bit philosophical, psychological, maybe, in the sense that like you come in, let's say you know what's right and what's wrong, and let's say the organization is wrong. You saying that they're wrong and you believing that you're right will do nothing to make the change, right? And the only way the change can happen is to kind of go away from the right versus wrong thing and move at a slower pace or a different pace than what you would expect. But that's the only way that you can make meaningful change. And that's what I mean by philosophical, psychological, is that you play a really difficult, I don't want to say the word game, but sort of like you have to remove your ego, or what you know is correct, or what you know or what you believe to be right. Because let's face it, maybe you come into the environment and you realize, oh, there is actually a better way to do it than the way I have always thought. And so there's this sense of a removal. It's interesting because VP of IT, very top level position, there's a little bit of ego that needs to be removed. Also, not just VP of IT top level position, you're in a position that's really fast paced on both sides, business and tech, and only gets faster and faster and faster. To be able to not ignore that, but let that go and move at the pace of your people is a humbling experience, right? And you have to kind of remove your ego to do that. I don't really have a question there, but that was kind of my thought there. I don't know if you have anything to
No,
add on to that, but
I agree. I think you have to come in with a growth mindset, right? That never goes away. I move into these roles because I do see an opportunity to keep learning and growing and getting into something new. And if you are not learning from it, right? Well, maybe then you're earning from it, but still, like, from my perspective, right? I mean, I still want to make sure, regardless of my title, that way the roles that I take, there is an opportunity to learn. And so you have to come into it with that growth mindset. Every organization's different, the cultures, the people, the way they, the customers they work with, and all of that is always going to be different. I think that's the fun part about being in IT, especially when you're in like enterprise applications. Um, not to minimize it, but like it's a skill set that you could go into different industries and know core IT systems and still go into a new industry and have the opportunity to learn something new about the business processes, about how they engage with customers or the markets that they're in and the different regulatory challenges that they have to deal with based on their industry. So I think that is the fun part that I enjoy, right? Is then learning some of that and having that appreciation. Otherwise, I don't want to do a rinse and repeat type role.
Sure, 100%, absolutely. Well, I don't want to say that objectively. I personally agree with that. I don't want to do a rinse and repeat role either. That is not an objective thing. Just like no one liking IT auditing is an objective thing either. So I'll state that. Um, hearing you talk, it really does sound like you enjoy your job and your role, and you kind of have to, right, to move up the way you did. But I also believe that not every love is not always sunshine and rainbows. I don't know if this is a present question or a past question, but have there ever been, or are there things that are currently or have previously been a challenge in your role or what you do, and how have you overcome that, or what are you doing to overcome that challenge?
Yeah. I mean, true. There's a lot of aspects of my role that I enjoy, and there are the not so glamorous parts. Like for me personally, for example, like I love the application side of things. Infrastructure management, not necessarily like the most interesting thing to me, right? It's something that has to be done. That's something you have to roll up your sleeves and understand and appreciate, and then find the right person to help do the maturity in that in those areas. So I think I recognize where I um, thrive. And I think recognizing where, well, I think recognizing where there are things that I'm not good at, bringing in those right folks to help support it, right, has been super important to help balance, right, on the good and the bad. And there are times, right, I have to roll up my sleeves and, doing budgeting, IT budgeting, not exactly the most glamorous thing, but you know the reason why. And if you ground yourself on, okay, this is why we do it, and
Why?
reminding folks why it's important. Um, and as I tell my stepdaughter, sometimes we just got to swallow the frog and get
Yes,
through
exactly.
the worst
Exactly.
part of the thing we want to do today, or the hardest, and move on. And so yeah, I think those are those areas. And as the head of IT, regardless of whether it's areas that I appreciate and enjoy versus don't appreciate as much, right? That's the constant learning that comes with this role. Regardless of that area, you do kind of have to keep your eye on all the different parts of IT, whether it's application, security, infrastructure, all those things, just to be able to know when you have to keep up, when you need to lean in and go deeper versus when it's okay, things are running out just fine.
I will say recently I have subscribed largely to the swallow the frog mentality, and I used to not, because for whatever reason, but I realized when I start the day with the thing I don't like the most, one, I have the least resistance in the morning for whatever reason, so I just get it done, and then everything afterwards becomes really, really easy. Like I'm like, oh, that's not as bad as the thing that I did in the morning. Everything gets done. What I wanted to say though is, let's do a psychological, a philosophical sort of exercise. Let's pretend, Taruna, that we love infrastructure. Why? Why is infrastructure amazing? Try it. Try it. Try it. What? What? Try it. I'm curious. I'm curious.
I mean, if you think about it, right, the connectivity that it does drive, right, I mean, imagine the world without infrastructure, right? Like, if you think of the alternative of it not existing, how would like the world of SaaS even exist? Right? Let's just be clear. Like, it is there is so much to it of being the foundation. It's one that um when you're in sales, it's not the shiny thing that
Mm,
always jumps out when it comes to marketing and coolness when you're trying to like appeal to a broad audience, right? If you think about like, I don't know, all these personal productivity tools, right? Super easy to market. So I think,
I see.
but it's one of those things. It's so foundational um, that just we have to appreciate it. I just getting into the nitty gritty of it, of like storage optimization and things like that. I think I don't mean to make it sound so negative. It's just I know it's not something I'm good at.
No, because it's just once upon a time that was the thing. You know what I mean? That
No.
was the technology that was like, wow, this is great. We can actually text each other and communicate across the way. We can actually like have internet. It's interesting because it is so foundational now. And I think that is such a testament to technology in general and to business, that things that were once so revolutionary are now foundational, and that we're
Mhm.
on to the next thing that actually enhances business. But I think there's something really interesting about this, and this is probably the next question, which is, back in the day, IT used to be the order taker.
Yes.
I feel guilty saying this because I'm not old enough to know back in the day, so I'm sorry to anyone who's listening. But back in the day, when I wasn't alive, IT was the order taker. It was like, we need this thing done so we can work. Please do this. And they were
Mhm.
like, yeah, cool. And no one complained because that was the developer mindset. It was like, that's all we want. We just want to be told what to do and we'll do it. Now, though, we have your role and people in your position who are like, wait a minute, IT is not just a cost center. It can also provide significant value to the organization and provide money, which means you have to actually become a little bit of a business person. You have to untrain the mind of all business to not look at IT as just an order taker, but IT as someone who can provide significant value to the business. So you can't just be a developer, which you are not. Sorry, I don't mean to say it like that, but
It's okay.
you
It's okay.
that's where we are. Um, you have to become kind of this person who can speak business but also speak tech. What I don't know if you were able to experience that transition, but what was that transition like, or what is it like being in a role or being in a place where it's not just the order taker, not just a cost center, but something that can provide value, because you're beyond infrastructure now, right? You're in systems, you are improving the business, you are providing things. And obviously, we haven't really talked specifically about what organizations you've worked for, but there are definitely some industries and some organizations where tech drives so much of what can happen, right? And so, what is it like being in the team that traditionally is behind the scenes to like, we are no longer behind the curtain. We are the Wizard of Oz. Look at us. Here we are.
Yeah, yeah. I'll say that it's interesting because when you um, when you're working for SaaS organizations, and the last two organizations I've been at are in that SaaS space, right? You are in an organization where there's a lot of great technologists. Like they understand software, they understand technology regardless of the function. And so it's interesting when I came to my current organization, there was still that perception of IT just do what I'm telling you to do because we understand software. So it's a different mindset of um, it's same but different in the sense that like everyone thought they knew technology, so they could just tell IT what to do and not worry about it. So it is even my current role, how we've pivoted that conversation to yes, there is you could accomplish this task by doing XYZ, exactly how person in marketing you've described it because you understand how your marketing application works. However, where we've up leveled and brought IT to the table is now it works for today. We are a SaaS organization that's adding products, that is expanding our portfolio of things we're going to sell. Now we have to apply the mindset of how is this going to work for tomorrow when we're growing, when we're expanding into new markets, how we need to do more complicated pricing and packaging scenarios. So that is then the pivot that even it is not a be back in the day problem. I think it's a it is still a relevant problem. So you are not a um, you're not out of date on that. From your age perspective, you haven't missed it. And, but it's still a conversation to be had. And does that mean that you have to now bring a new, bring that, translate that mindset to something that our stakeholders understand, that they appreciate why you're there and having a seat at the table of thinking through those processes. And particularly when you're in an organization where you have IT has the unique role of seeing a process from a system end to end, right? Finance, they understand how to, book invoices and collect payments and things like that versus they're not naturally always working with the sales team and understanding how sales wants to sell the product and how they want to price and package it, et cetera. So I think leveraging the fact that we see how that data flows end to end across different teams has been a way to warrant our seat at the table. Because, like, if you do this decision here, these are these other things. And have we thought through them? And it's simply asking the question, almost like being a business analyst. Like, if I'm making an update, okay, how about this business role? What happens to this business role, et cetera? Have we thought through it? And so I think being able to pull together those stakeholders from, hey, and from a kind place of, we are responsible for the systems. We need to know what to build all the way through to the end of the process, has really brought that appreciation to my peers. Oh, why IT deserves a seat at the table in these conversations.
I actually think I've never actually heard this before or worded in this way. I think that's actually really interesting that you are in charge of the systems, but you also are in charge of the data. You see so much of the organization in such a unique way, right? It would be amiss for you or remiss for you not to take advantage is a little aggressive, but to use that in a way that puts you at the seat of the table. And it's like, hey, we see everything as long as, IT's doing their job right. We see everything in the organization. We understand how things are flowing and how things are going. Here's waste. Here's how we can be more efficient. Here's how we can be more effective for external stakeholders, for our customers, but also internally. I see now you have to become a salesperson, a marketing person, a business person to really do that role. And so I think there's something I really appreciate you kind of putting that spin on that of you have data and information and knowledge that no one else in the company has, which makes you and your team very important in how the company moves forward. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Moving forward, Taruna, what are kind of your biggest priorities and challenges? And how do they support the business or even personal priorities and challenges for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think priorities, challenges, I think we can't make it this far in the podcast and not talk about AI
Yep.
and the efficiencies and how it's just going to make things move faster, right? Quite frankly. And so, from a priority perspective, and it's going to be a challenge, is we know there's technology out there that can make everything, things move faster, um, make things easier. And so, how we prioritize that for an organization. So, my current org, we're growing fast. Um, how we want to be a small but mighty team and keep up with the pace of everything. So I think how constantly looking at where we put resources to help things move faster, how we move faster as an IT organization and leverage tools and technologies to do that, to support everybody else and balance that with how everybody else wants to get things done faster in the organization. It is both a priority and a challenge that I think many of my peers deal with in the roles that we're at with all the innovation that's happening right now in our space.
But in the words of you, it's fun. It's going to be fun.
I think it is. I think it's and that's why I stay in this, right? Is just it's always changing. I'm always learning. There's so many great ideas out there when you're collaborating with your peers and understanding the problems, and to bring in all those diverse perspectives to really produce something very cool is what keeps me motivated, and to make it interesting and get through some of the ugly rolling up your sleeves, friction, figuring out the challenge, the ugly problems that we have to get through to get to really great outcomes.
Yeah, I think you are the definition of a cool nerd. I think that's how it goes.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I'm so glad this is gonna be on the podcast. I'm going to tell everybody that.
Clearly you have identified with nerd more than cool enough for that compliment to hit you as hard as it did. You're like looking around. Hey, do you guys hear that? You guys hear that? To close, and this is the final question, and this is the soapbox moment, if you will. What are some of the most important lessons that you've learned over your career that you would like to share with the audience? And keep in mind, the audience is not like up and coming IT professionals, but like your peers. What are some of the things that you've learned over your career that you'd like to impart upon your equals?
I think we touched on a few of them around the humbleness and the growth mindset is something that we all need to embrace and to keep to keep the innovation going, the curiosity of continuing to learn. I think the advocacy for IT, always having a seat at the table, is something we touched on, I think is a key takeaway. And I think what we also touched on, Jay, was the importance of the evolution of this role of, yes, you're a technologist, but you are also a business strategist. And, not to lose sight of that. It's so easy in organizations to get caught up in that. And it's a balancing act for sure. So I think we touched on all of those topics today of just you're constantly balancing, constantly growing, and constantly learning.
Well, Taruna, and I'm just going to use your word again. This is probably one of the most fun conversations I've had in a long time, period. Not even just on this podcast, but like with people in general. This was so fun. I'm very entertained, but also I think you're very smart and very intelligent and very good at your job, but also very in touch. You talk about how your job is very personable and very human, and I feel that too. I just wanted to say thank you so much for kind of.
It was fun. It was a fun
energy you bring.
conversation.
I agree 100%. Well, I wish you all the best. I hope we keep in touch. I think you have words of wisdom beyond, and I wish you all the best and take care.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed this Keeping IT Real episode, and thank you for listening. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. This podcast is all about celebrating and connecting professional heroes who work hard at IT every day. To continue the conversation and learn how VCOM can help you better buy, manage, and pay for your technology, visit us at vcomsolutions.com. Until next time.